Shalom, hello, all that crap, right? Anyways, let's get into some freaky weird shit. Tesla stuff. You know, I've even kind of changed some of my conclusions on what I think happened on 9/11, just looking more into some things recently. Which is, you know, I guess a good thing, because you always should be open-minded to learning more. You know, we learn things because we've been lied to. So we want to learn things new. And then we get these new ideas out there, whether they come from videos like mine on YouTube, whether we read it, whether it's social media, whatever it is. But I notice sometimes people lock onto them too hard, all right, without really fully understanding where those ideas or that information came from, or who brought them that information. And once it's locked onto, it's like people can't get off of it. And I understand that. It's like, you know, you've been lied to so much in your life, and then all of a sudden you're proposed a new idea. And that new idea does make sense. But wait a second. We forget that the people that are in the PSYOP business are oftentimes ahead of the game. They've been ahead of us for a long time, you know. So let me move that straight a little bit so I don't look all weird. But so it's kind of tough to break free for some of those ideas once you learn them as new, as your first new experience in truth. You know, it becomes a new belief system, and it's hard to let go of that, okay? And oftentimes they're not exactly wrong, but we have to be able to go further and further and further and dig deeper. And you have to be able to have your mind opened enough to say, okay, yeah, I learned something new that replaced a lie, but I also should learn more about that something new. You know, where can I take it further? Where can I, you know, where can I get the total truth, a full understanding of this new knowledge? And it's not always easy to do. So what we're doing here is definitely talking about Tesla. And, you know, some of the things I have always liked, you know, about Tesla is, you know, the free energy ideas and everything like that. And then you get kind of a bad taste in your mouth when when you see all his things he did with the number 33 and his very kind of, well, let's say Masonic, you know, acquaintances and history. So then you're like, what's going on here? You know, is this full truth? Is this, you know, always good? And you start to learn about some of this technology, and you're like, you know, some of this stuff that he proposed back then is coming true today, but it's not exactly great, you know? I mean, we're learning that 5G technology is polluted and diluted and, you know, not that great for us. You know, anything over 1G is basically cooking our brain cells. And we learn things like that. And we go, well, wait a second, maybe this Tesla technology wasn't so great. You know, I'm not sure, but I'd like to think that maybe Tesla, being alive today, would say, hey, you know, this is not what I was thinking. You know, we didn't have some of the scientific evidence showing what my, you know, experiments could do, what my technology could do to people, and whether or not it could hurt people, harm people, and actually cause death. You know, so. But then you also have to remember that, you know, there's been question about when he was building some of his equipment, and, you know, contractors that were working on his equipment, he wasn't too happy with them not going the extra step or further, or endangering their own lives to complete his projects. So there's that part of him that was always kind of a scientist. Scientist, let me see this. The only way I could say it is, hi, Blizzy. Blizzy, you saying hi? You coming to say hi? Yeah, you can't see her right there, but she came over to say hi. You want to say hi? Come on, you want to say hi? I'm over there. There she said hi. But scientists aren't always the nicest people. All right, now I'm gonna have my seat back here, Blizzy. They sometimes are kind of emotionless on the results of what their power, their energy, or whatever their experiment they're working on can do. They are locked into that experiment. They are totally emotionless with the effect that experiment has on society. And that's not always a good thing, especially when they're quite often working with con men from military, and other, departments within our government where the people are very nefarious. Yeah, sure, Mr. Scientist. Here's some more money. You're doing such a great job. Oh, this is such a great thing for humanity. All while knowing that they're going to use that technology to blow somebody up or kill somebody, But what I wanted to talk about today first is, of course, what we're going to show you here. Let me blow this up for you so you can see it. Okay. What we're going to show you here is, this is Wardenclyffe. Okay. Now, what we saw the other day was and I'm going to tie it into 9/11. I know I had that mentioned in my tweet earlier that we're going to talk about 9/11, but this is all going to get tied in, and it's all going to kind of make sense once you see what's fully going on here. This is Wardenclyffe. Okay. Wardenclyffe is in Shoreham, New York. Okay. I believe it's about 9 miles east of Port Jarvis, and the original property that was allotted to Tesla is now where Brookhaven National Laboratory sits on. Okay, which we find interesting. Okay, because what we did see with this latest blue beam is, wait a second, its correlation and relationship with the Con Ed building. All right, remember, Wardenclyffe was this, maybe the best way to explain it to you was some of the experimentation that was going on there, or was proposed to go on there, that may never have had a chance to get finished, is by switching over to this article here. Okay, so let me switch that over and let's take a quick look at this article. Okay, let's blow this up a little bit here, but we can get my glasses on here. Okay, this is Warden, and it's wireless. A lot of it was proposed for wireless technology. Okay, the creation of this experiment was to transmit literally pictures, sound, everything wirelessly. Okay, there was even a proposed that there was another second Wardenclyffe Tower type of thing in Scotland that was built with Tesla. Okay, so at this time that this was built, Tesla had been at his Colorado Springs where he was experimenting, his laboratory there, and then comes back to New York. Okay, so this is 70 miles east of New York City is where this tower is. Okay, and I think the interesting thing here, of course, it was designed for, basically the first wireless system. But where he talks about here, let me see. Describe the function. Yeah, here we go. In June 1900, in his article, The Problem of Increasing Human Energy. In this interesting article, he described his detailed and futuristic vision. He explained about some means of trapping the sun's energy with using an antenna, and he suggested that it would be possible to control the weather with electrical energy. Again, okay, he explained about some means of tapping the sun's energy with using an antenna, and he suggested that it would be possible to control weather with electrical energy. Okay, and I'm gonna, the reason why I wanted to talk about this a little bit is because when we're talking about controlling the weather, what we do see is, people look at a lot of this chemtrailing as cloud seeding, and in a way it is, but is it actually more or less seeding the atmosphere when they're finding aluminum? And I'm going to bring aluminum back up when we get into talking more about the lasers again, and actually understanding what lasers are, what this type of energy actually is. Okay, because we sometimes lump it into what we see or what we remember from a movie in the 1980s about a laser, and we are maybe misinforming people on what some of this energy actually is. So, it's quite interesting. He's talking about weather manipulation and electrical energy. The question is, are they creating this, what would you call it? I guess, space fence or atmosphere fence, where they're making the sky electric, okay? Or making it so it's more reactive at times, so they can further along their studies. Yesterday talking with Bill about the two sites, the Con Ed building in Queens and also the Kenner site in Louisiana outside of New Orleans, is that those areas were heavily chemtrailed prior to this incident. And from what I was seeing before he even notified me of that, is that it almost seemed like that these laser laboratories were somehow directing energy up into the sky and then bouncing it off the atmosphere back down to transformers. And that was basically a transmission of energy, okay? Now, you could call it a laser beam, whatever you want to call it. It really doesn't matter at this point. What you need to understand is it's an actual transfer of energy. And that's all really a laser is. If you're heating up something with a laser, right? Even if, we're talking about dews in California or wherever, if you're heating something up with a laser beam, the actual air in between is not being heated up that much. It is the matter that it's striking, or the intended target that is taking the brunt of the energy. Now, if you can build something that can absorb that energy without burning up, you can take in that energy and actually contain that energy. And matter of fact, if I post this article up with this video, you will see that that is exactly what he's talking about back in the 1900s. So I believe it was in June of 1900. So sometime in that range, within the first few years of the 1900s, he was actually talking and discussing with J.P. Morgan the containment of electromagnetic waves. Okay, so when I actually thought of that, well, then I find this article that actually backs up these experiments were going on over 100 years ago, or these ideas were proposed over 100 years ago. This is nothing new, okay? So that's something we need to talk about more. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick. What we got in there? Yeah. The dude in there is a troll from, just so you know, was in there, Niven. The guy in there is a side Thorn troll. So, a matter of fact, I'm going to kick him out of the chat here. I muted him for now because, that's just a, what do you call it? That's a side Thorn shill. Anyways, see, that's the thing, and usually you could tell when you're over the target is when you have the shills come in. So, yeah, no problem, Niven. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make him not moderator too, because if you see that come back up, just remove him, kick him out. I don't have time to deal with stupid. So that's the case, is we're seeing an actual transfer of power, okay? I wish I actually saved the video, and I may tag it along once I post this video up on BitChute. And you'll see what happened in Louisiana and Kenner. There is the strike of power was being walked up and down those transformers. And some might say, well, they wanted to blow them all out. And no, what I'm proposing there is they were actually evening out the transfer of power so that they didn't just burn up one actual specific transformer. Because what you saw in New York City is they more targeted, just 3 large transformers, and that's why you saw many more energy distribution. When they had to walk it up to smaller transformers, you can't just let it all shock in there. And also you'll notice that I was right about the type of energy transmission, that this was actually a oscillating transmission of power. Okay, so, and lasers can work like that, where it's just basically, you know, instead of just letting it concentrate, oscillating it to regulate its power. Okay. Before I come back here, I just wanted to touch one other point. Let me see. Advance further. Open wireless plant. Blah blah blah. Or where there's another part here. Okay. Let's find some information from Gardner. Tells the Morgan he proposed a scheme of the system. It's private words, not interfere with communication. Pictures around the world at that time. Okay. When wireless is fully applied, the Earth will be converted into a huge brain capable of response in every part of one of its parts. All right. The reason why I wanted to discuss that, let me come back over here real quick. Okay. The brain part is what I find scary. Okay. In theory, when we're talking about this transmission of power all over the world, with information, you know, not just the energy. See, there's multiple applications for this type of device or device of energy. Is like we're finding, it was how did they find the target? Okay, you can put geo coordinates and this and that, but when you're bouncing stuff off of the sky, right? It's kind of like, all right, you know, it's kind of, you're gonna have to find that direction. You're gonna have to find that point. You know, zero in on that target, right? But what I talked with Bill about was if they had smart technology built into that laser. Okay, in other words, that laser is actually an active, like, communication cell, just like Tesla was talking about. It can communicate back as it finds its target, and then basically telling the scientists to dial in that little thing there and just go boom. I'm going to turn on the oscillation a little bit harder in this particular point because that's hitting the target. And once it's found, it can just zero into those targets, and it's nice. It's a lot easier. And with these supercomputers, that speed and ability of finding those targets is literally basically instantaneous. So that's the case that we have here. Is, you know, 100 years ago, this technology was being proposed, and there's a lot of information that Tesla actually succeeded in transferring power from Wardenclyffe Tower to New York City. Okay, that's the same thing as if Brookhaven Laboratory, and let me bring that up real quick. Okay, Brookhaven Laboratory in where Wardenclyffe was on Long Island transferred to Queens Con Ed building. And where would you transfer energy to? You transfer it to the Con Ed building because that's where its transformers are. It's a generating station. It's well grounded, and that's how you can transfer that power. Okay, so you know there's a case of this happening, and you gotta understand this is they're using beams of light. Okay, within that beam of light, you know, people have sometimes maybe a hard time understanding that you can contain information. It's not just power and energy, but it's also information. Okay, so if you could shoot the information one way, it can also come back the other way, just fast. And why I am concerned about this and the chemtrails, and that is because when he's talking about making the atmosphere a human brain, okay, you're transferring all this information into the sky. Okay, and it's like when we're speaking, that sound is coming out, that frequency is coming out, and your brain is absorbing that frequency, translating it into your sound and knowledge, and it's all, you know, translated into in your mind. But what's happening if they're emitting, you know, knowledge into the sky? Okay, in some ways that could be great if the right people are doing that, and they're giving information out into the sky of how people can, learn how to help people in poor countries, dig drainage ditches or irrigation ditches and grow food and stuff like that. But we know these people are kind of nefarious, and that's a problem, because when you think about it in the wrong hands, that kind of information, an area can be chemtrailed before it's attacked by our government or by our military, and then that program could tell these people, lay down your guns, don't fight, give up, surrender, submit, And what happens? People give up because it's basically brainwashing in the sky. That's the part that scares me. Is, you know, what is our sky going to be filled with if our sky can be turned into a human brain? Okay? And I don't like this at all, to be honest with you. You know, technology can be a great thing when it's used correctly and for the right purposes. You know, transferring electricity around the world. I mean, think about it. You know, in poor countries, if you can set up one of these towers and it transmit power to small villages, you know, to, substations in those small villages, so they have electricity to run electric, well pumps and stuff like that, so they can get water and other things like that. That would be great. But the people that always get their hands on this stuff, not so good. Not so good. No, that's not usually what happens. So it does scare me a little bit. And here is what I'm going to bring in and propose next. And this you might find interesting. I thought it was interesting. Somebody mentioned it on the chat last night. This is a map, okay? All right, there's two lines here I drew, okay? You'll see the red blob in the middle there is Brookhaven National Laboratory. The red line is a line to Ground Zero. The blue line is a line to Queens Conrad Building, okay? You see? You know, it's interesting that they're pretty close distances, and we also talked about how that this same distance is the laboratory and the strike site in Kenner distance, okay? So this same distance, this pretty equivalent distance, is what happened in Kenner, okay? And you have to start saying, wait a second, how are these places that happen the same day, same distance, same type of thing go on in, that exact same, pretty much exact same distance of the type of place that works with lasers, okay? So the other thing is, yeah, it could have possibly been from a plane that flew above and shot one of these lasers, yes, but we still have the Brookhaven and the LIGO down in Louisiana laboratory scientists that are needed to measure these things, because they're the ones that measure lasers. There's people that actually do that for a living. They study and measure electromagnetic waves and understand the principles behind this. So here's the thing, is no matter what happened at these two sites, there are scientists within close range that know exactly what happened. Exactly. Matter of fact, I think, this week maybe I should call one of these laboratories and question them. Of course, we won't probably get past the secretary that doesn't know shit anyway, so we'll never get a good answer. But maybe people need to start questioning these people, because they know what happened. There's no doubt about it. The one thing I don't like about Brookhaven Laboratory is, before it was my belief with 9/11, okay? Because I studied the tunnel system under 9/11 and what went on, is that, yeah, they did use some kind of electromagnetic type of microwave to blow up the towers. I believe they originally, what they did is put a ball, a aluminum ball. And again, I'm talking about aluminum. There's an interesting thing, because they even use aluminum. One of the first measurements of a laser or electromagnetic wave or a gravitational wave was using a metal cylinder to relate it into sound. So in other words, actually, if you want to get sound or actually, a reverberation in the skies, you would put aluminum in there, okay? But so I originally thought they used a electromagnetic ball and somehow got that up on top of each of the towers, and as it dropped, the ball dropped, it compounded those frequencies. The other thing now is, I'm believing, is that instead of shooting that electromagnetic device up through the buildings, is that they had maybe a ball or something like that in each of those buildings, and then shot the actual, what I'm calling an arc. All these streaks of electricity, of energy that you see from the Tesla coils. Some people, if you want to call them lasers, that's fine. Whatever you want to call them, I'm calling them arcs, because they're more like an arc. And it's a direct energy arc that is a focused arc, and it's hitting these cylinders, and it can destroy anything in its wake. Could be wrong about that. The elite don't use anything good for us. No, they don't. They don't use anything great for us at all. So it's kind of scary. There are cylinders all over old churches. And which cylinders are you talking about that are over old churches? I mean, in theory, yeah, a lot of their spirals and whatnot. I'm not sure what they're made of, but yeah, I mean, churches can attract that kind of energy too. Maybe that was an old-fashioned way of taking in that that wave of energy into the church or whatever. Maybe that's how they were designed, and some of that secret knowledge that our Masons and Templars have known about it. I believe a lot of this knowledge that they always talk about getting stolen here and there and hidden in these treasures is of centuries, not centuries, of civilizations of hundreds and if not millions of years ago. You got to remember, you got to look around, and every single thing in your house in 10,000 years or 100,000 years, there's not a thing in your house, no matter what it is, that's not going to turn to dust. Okay? And it will only add up as layers of crap on the ground. Even stone itself, after a long time, it basically crumbles into a living thing. It dies. It's gonna deteriorate after a long time. And of course, stone does last a lot longer, but the majority of things is just gonna crush. The only way that information and knowledge can get passed on to the future is basically by word of mouth, and that's probably the biggest secret of the Masons and whatsoever, is that they somehow do it by word of mouth, where it's able to stay within a group, and that's why they're always able to come out on top throughout probably ages and ages. So people don't realize that they think things will last forever. Well, they don't. Things don't last forever. Metal, you name it, will it'll rust, deteriorate, fall apart, and it'll just turn to dust when a long enough time comes along. But the interesting thing is here, the parallels I'm seeing with this energy transmission in 9/11, there's a good chance that could have happened. So probably on a ley line. I'm not sure if Brookhaven's on a ley line. It may be. There's this particular area where Brookhaven is. There's a lot of history here. Okay. If you want to get into the old, because I'm a little bit of a treasure hunter, and the old story behind close to this part of Long Island was that Captain Kidd, when they were hunting him down, he parks out not too far away from this part of the island, and on the north shore there, not far from where Wardenclyffe would have been. And it was a gardener family. It was a really old family that lived in New York, and they're another quasi Illuminati family, and I think it was the gardener family, and supposedly he hid some of his treasure there because he knew he was on the run and they're chasing him down. And that family ended up getting really wealthy, and and this is where it ties back into Tesla, which is quite interesting. Okay, so that family is basically the same as the Astor family, and if you know anything about Tesla, he lived in the Astor Hotel, owned by the Astor family. Okay, so I think that's another neat quinky dink, because after this incident happened with Kidd, is the Astor family became fairly wealthy. Okay, and if I remember correctly, the Astor family even traces back to ties to the family that owns that property in England, where the reverse Shepherds of Acadia is made in stone there. So it's actually quite interesting. That's why it's important to understand these histories, because you can see how some of these things connect, and it will blow your mind. Because when it comes down to it, when you really study a lot of these Illuminati families, whether it's people like the Bushes, or like the Astors, or Bill Clinton wasn't part of the Clinton family that I'm talking about here, but the old Clinton family from New York, the Illuminati Clinton family, DeWitt Clinton. These were all pirates, people related to pirates. These people are constantly stealing from each other, robbing from each other, hiding shit, stealing shit, and people don't even know what they're hiding, stealing, and robbing. Okay? It's always an interesting tale when you never know which treasure they're hunting for or what they're doing. Because when you even look at 9/11, what was the church across the street from 9/11? The church at Wall in Church. Just like the National Treasure story. And not only that, there was a tunnel under that church. Captain Kidd built that church. Okay? Yeah. Captain Kidd built that church originally. Okay? And I think he's even, there was a tale that he buried stuff under the graveyard. So, that movie parallels actual treasure hunter knowledge. So I always found it quite interesting. And that's why I was always chasing the tunnels under 9/11 as what they were using to destroy the towers. Because I understood about the tunnel system, the Masonic tunnel system that was in that area. I said, well, and that's another thing too. The Masons are involved. I mean, come on. You and I both know. I mean, if they're doing something to a building like that and, they're going to be using tunnels, get in and out, get their people in and out, do what they need to do, different things like that. And if they call that particular tunnel the Masonic tunnel system, the Masons know and are involved. So, you can blame Israel all you want, and most of those Masons are Judeo-Masons, but, whether they're Jewish Masons or Christian Masons or whatever, the Masons are no religion when it comes down to it. They're just evil, Satanists, crazy motherfuckers, stealing, robbing thieves. They were involved. Doesn't matter what religion they are. They were involved because it's their system. When you build something or you just, or you even knock it down, you got to call a Mason, a Masonic, building association of building people, So, blame the Masons instead of blaming Saudi Arabia or Israel or whatever. It doesn't matter. The Masons at the top of all those countries are still the freaking Masons, So they need to be they need to be taken down. But let me tell you something. These people have a lot of hidden knowledge. They're just burping this at us. This little blue beam was a burp, just showing us a little something they can do to scare everybody. And it could have been more of a test in public. More than likelihood, it was some sort of an experiment when you did it twice on the same day. This type of, what people were seeing as far as the blue beam or whatever, they're seeing that was particles being heated up, okay? And what Tesla was talking about in that article too is that it's not actually radiation, but it can be, used with electromagnetic waves and cause radiation. So, this disturbance that's going to go through the sky, it's going to, and he says there's no radiation, but the transfer of power isn't, but you're still transferring other things if you're doing other experiments with it. And that light may have been the laser that was used to guide in that power. Okay, and what's happening is as it's traveling through the atmosphere, it's heating up the atmosphere, they're heating up the particles. And as the particles get excited, they're emitting light, kind of like, what do you call it? Like I think that's how Firefly works. The particles get excited and basically lights up, right? And that's what people are seeing. They're seeing almost like a lightning bug effect, right? I don't know if that makes any sense to everybody, but that's it. We can figure out their knowledge, then we don't need them. Yeah, that's what I like to do. I'd like to see that happen. And it's not just that we need to figure it out. We actually have to turn it into live, a real experiment. Having the knowledge and understanding of what they can do is not that complicated. I think we could even take it a step further in a lot of ways. But the manpower to put some of these experiments together to use it against them, I don't know. It's going to be tough. You know, we understand it. But just think about this whole conversation that I just had. You know, given that conversation to somebody out there that's not awake, they're just going to look at it like, I'll fluoride it out. So just having their knowledge is not good enough. It's the translation of that knowledge to the people. And that's the most complicated thing of all. Because the knowledge, I don't think, is that complicated. You know, lasers aren't that complicated. They're pretty simple. You know, I actually think it's old-fashioned technology when it comes to some of the things that I've always looked at when it comes to this type of thing. I think it's old-fashioned technology. And if I'm thinking it's old-fashioned technology, there's a good chance that there's people out there that also think the same and are far advanced than what we know. You know, fluoride state. Yeah, it would. It sure would. We have to wake the man. Yeah, it's the hardest challenge in the world. You know, and a lot of times I feel guilty because I always say I give up on trying to wake these people up. You know, because it's like, screw them. It's like a battle. It's a fight. Then you got the shills. You got to do. I'd rather not. I'd rather not. You know, it's like the only way I think I would be involved in waking up masses is doing something so large scale it snaps a shock into people. You know, spending time with social media when the control of social media is in the hands of the PSYOP people, the military intelligence, and other different NGO groups that want to just influence how people think. So the ability to do that through social media, not so much. Even videos or whatever, the control in the internet is astonishing by the people that want us to think a certain way. So, yeah, I'm not sure about that one, you know? So frustrating. Trolls don't help. No, they don't. What does the chat think about the ball model? Yeah, well, you know, according for this type of technology, that's the sad thing. I'm sorry, people, you know, that I know everybody always wants me to call the Earth flat and this and that, but, you know, even Tesla, I mean, this technology wouldn't work unless the Earth was round. Sorry. And there's nothing you could do about that. So, in other words, the experiments that you just saw recently in Louisiana and in New York would not work, you know. And the experimenting they're doing with the they wouldn't be spending all that money with space fencing us to make the atmosphere a brain unless you know, they were able to do it in the flat technology. You know what would happen in an environment of flatness? It won't work. So, you know, I have no choice what to say. How my feeling on it is, but you're more than welcome. You know, if you really study it, it comes down to, yeah, it's an old ritualistic mind fuck of flat Earth from the Masons. That's all it is. It's a NASA psyop to make people like, you know, me seem crazy if I jumped on board with that. So that's my belief. But people want to believe everything else. Listen, you know, I can't stop what they're doing to people's brains. So I'm not going to argue over that one. If you want it to be flat, fine, let it be flat. In theory, we are a mass frequency creating machine. If the whole world thought it was flat and we sent out that frequency, we could turn it flat. That's the power of knowledge. But that ain't happening, so it's stuck being the physics that most believe. As much as yeah, you're right about that. Even flat around doesn't matter as much as electromagnetism, and that's a lot of what this was all out. This is, you know, this is all, you know, the gravitational wave discussion that's going on at these laboratories is what you got to pay attention to, because this goes back to the Tesla research, and you know, his control of basically when he's talking about controlling the electromagnetic wave, he's talking about you know, controlling a gravitational wave. Okay, this is very interesting work, especially when Brookhaven has a history in working with, or rumor of working with, time travel, because, you know, this does have a lot to do with the explanation of time and space. And, you know, then we're starting to get into some very interesting questions when we get into this. And we have to be careful, because there's a lot of a lot of out there rabbit holes when we get into this stuff. Doesn't mean they're all wrong, and we have to be careful. We have to be careful which ones they seed us with, because, you know, some of these out there ideas may actually be something very real, and we got to make sure that they don't get infiltrated, our brains get infiltrated by misleading ideas, so we can actually concentrate on figuring out what this all means, you know. So Masons created the button. That's the first me, you know. Interesting that you did Paragathus. The whole foundation of working the laser is built on that. All right, so that's quite interesting that you brought that up. Is that's how they detect lasers, is using partial Pythagoras theory to work. So yeah, I mean, that's interesting point, you know, but it's, you could go both ways with that, you know. You could say that the Masons created the ball, you know, and flat. So in theory, you know, you may be right. They kind of, if they're the ones that basically pass down, you know, how to, you know, cartography. Yeah, I mean, you can basically say both ways. Either way, I don't think there's enough evidence to prove either at this point in time. You know, I try to search things before the Masons, try to find something not associated with yeah, try. They don't let you have that knowledge. I think that's a lot of the knowledge they destroy. You know, they want it to be what they want, so everything else they destroy. Without Masons, there is no war. Just about every single general and colonel in every single country's military is a Mason. Therefore, there is no war without the Masons. When it comes down to it, if you want peace on earth, the Masons have to go. Period. There are no exceptions. And I'm sure there's a lot of good people that are Masons out there that have been misled, and they need to wake up, because I'm sorry. And I know there are some good ones out there, but if you're not awake, you really need to wake up, because what you're supporting is doing so much harm to the world, and that needs to stop. I'm attempting to invent my own knowledge. That's what I like to hear. I think Niven nailed it right there. Is, yeah, throw out, you know, when I look, the whole thing with the blue light, you know, I didn't want to look into it, and everybody's saying it's aliens. Okay, it's aliens. It's a dew, and you know, my first thought was, when I kept on hearing people say it's dew, okay, it was a dew, and my first thought was it's a plane. And then I said, you know, I'm not going to look at all these videos telling me that what it is, right? I looked at the fact that all the videos I was seeing showed a view that showed the United Nations and the East River, and then behind it, that particular Con Ed building. Then I was like, that you know, Con Ed building, its history and its correlation with Brookhaven Laboratory. Once I started looking at it, I was like, okay, well, Brookhaven's where they're working on lasers. They got the scientists to do this stuff, and they're not far away. Then I understood a little bit about Wardenclyffe rather, where they were actually doing the same exact experiment. Okay, so back in 1900s, they were actually doing an experiment where they were sending electricity, a beam basically of electricity, from right where Brookhaven Laboratory is to New York City. Okay, if I remember, it was like Houston Street where it may have actually happened, which is right down the road, not far down the road from where the Twin Towers were. So this experiment that literally, let's say, just propose, okay? If back in the 1900s they were able to send electricity through the sky from a point where Brookhaven Laboratory is to basically the same distance in New York City where the Twin Towers were, what makes you think they couldn't do that today or in 2001? Bet your ass they can. And they could do it to the point of where they could demolish a building 100 years later. Because that's what it was. It was about 100 years later, that experiment. Okay? I wouldn't even be surprised if it was pretty close to the day 100 years later. So, yeah, the possibilities of the towers being, taken down by this are there. Not only that, you got to remember, Brookhaven Laboratory is suspected of shooting some sort of a beam to take down Flight 800. Okay? People on Long Island said they saw something like a beam of light, and then the plane go down. Okay? And then we also have JFK Jr. His flight approaching Martha's Vineyard would have gone in that path that Brookhaven has experimented with that if they are the ones that did take down Flight 800. So, I do have a problem when scientists are actually suspected of killing people. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter. Here, let's say, for instance, possibility of them clearing out those Twin Towers and there was nobody in there. Fine. You want to take a position like that? What about all of those firefighters that got cancer? Who's going to take responsibility for them? Are those scientists going to take responsibility for their experiment causing all those firefighters and first responders and people that lived in the area to suffer cancer and die horribly? It's unacceptable. I don't care if free energy or not. It's not worth putting people suffering through this. It's unacceptable. And so people at Brookhaven Laboratory, literally, they need to be drugged into a FEMA camp and literally interrogated like they do in Guantanamo to find out who is behind this shit. Because I don't care who you are, all the knowledge in the world that you may have to create some new, exciting, great technology, if it by chance at all is going to be used for harm, you need to keep that to yourself. Don't tell people, ever, because they will use it for harm. So scientists have a problem in understanding that type of emotion. They don't get it. They're more passionate about not saying they're bad people, it's the way their brain works. Their brains work on a non-emotional side, an engineer brain, okay? And many people, and I'm not saying bad things about engineers, I'm just saying that, if there's any ladies out there and they ever dated an engineer, they're very non-emotional, just burlap sacks, right? So, there's that. It is unacceptable. But how can people look up at the sky and not think something is up? Yeah. Yeah, the chemtrails are getting, there's no excuse. People should know what they're getting into. Yeah, you're right. Attempting that. Yeah. That's the thing about weather manipulation. I am sure they're doing it for, just like anything, they got many different agendas. And that's why I think we're seeing different chemtrails in different times. Some of these chemtrails may be, for just the straight up weather manipulation. Some may be to reflect energy. You got to remember, just because we saw those energy bursts, okay, we saw something go on here in Queens and down in Kenner, Louisiana, doesn't mean that they haven't already made the sky so that it can actually transfer images, information, which is basically wireless technology. But when we're talking about making the sky alive or electric, it's the ability to transfer further and more. Okay, so that's another dangerous thing. But what do you think Tesla was talking about when he was talking about weather modification? Okay, it all kind of seems to fit together in the same type of experimentation that's going on. Science feels us garbage and has tech on us. Yeah. You gotta remember, that's the scary thing we're looking at. Okay, And, you know, I noticed a while back the shills were talking about something. Every once in a while I like to check out the shills. And I checked out a video from Alex Jones interviewing David Icke. I said, I got to watch this. Two shills talking to each other. And you'll notice that sometimes they slip in nuggets of stuff that, like, if the sheep were watching, wouldn't understand it. And they slipped in this little thing where they said to be patient with people because some of them are going to fall back asleep and the people that are really awake are going to wake up in advance and a lot further. And it's like, how the fuck do you know that? How? I mean, you know, who told you? Okay, that's a kind of random thing to say, right? And I'm like, well, if they have knowledge and they're part of, you know, the whole secret society thing or whatever is going on here, you know, they might have knowledge of that. They might have knowledge of frequencies being used to, you know, turn sheeple off, you know, and then the question is, why are the really awake people going to wake up even further? Are they understanding the frequency of certain people's brains that, you know, that they're almost regulating or, you know, able to dial in the ability for some people to expand their minds other than others? Are they finding out that some people shouldn't have their brains active? You know, that's a scary thing. And then you think about, well, maybe that's a good thing that they're allowing me to have my brain active, right? And then wait a second, are they controlling my brain? No, they're not. What they're doing is they're shooting out there some frequencies. And I think what happened is that they're experimenting with is, you know, some people woke up at a certain point, right? You know, the activity in the brain got to a certain point. Well, you know, once that frequency is generated, it's not going to fall back. But, you know, they may just not be shooting out those frequencies that will excite a brain to wake up anymore, or to wake up so much anymore. You know, and that's what maybe a lot of these false flags even tie into, is giving that jolt, you know, that once that frequency is in the atmosphere for people to wake up, right, that excitement, and now they need a jolt. They need a holy shit, you know, and, you know, to see how controlled our world really is a holy shit moment that wakes people up, you know. You're going, yeah, you know, that's the scary thing is when I heard that too, is, I mentioned that, is, you know, I keep on getting this sense that they're going to do something this year major. You know, we saw a lot of weird things with the shills this year. They revealed kind of a lot of information in a weird way to the public, or to the people that are awake. And it seems like, you know, something is up. We've seen in some cases certain networks kind of quiet up, which was really bizarre. And other groups, you know, just more active. It's just kind of weird. It's really weird. Something is up. What it is, I don't know. That's going to be interesting to say. You know, here's the thing. If they're running tests on transmitting this power, you know, this, maybe they actually are going to gear up for a fake alien invasion. You know, because here's the thing. They have these laboratories that can do this type of thing all over the country. And along with, you know, our Air Force planes having these direct energy weapons and everything else, they can make, if they're making the sky literally a brain, right? Well, those particles, they can, in theory, okay, in theory, all right, you chemtrail an area heavy enough, okay, and you're making, you know, basically the sky electric. Well, like almost like in like a TV screen or LED screen, you know, you can excite those particles in such a way it displays an image. And Tesla was talking about that 100 years ago. So in other words, you could display an image of a freaking spaceship in the sky, right? Then, and I hate to get, hopefully I'm not giving this knowledge to the crazy military scientists out there, but in theory, yeah, you can excite the particles in the sky, making an image of a spaceship, then at the same time doing a little arc of energy project like from Brookhaven Laboratory, and you know, zap a building, you know. So in other words, you know, let's say it's New York City. You want to put a fake alien invasion over New York City, which would have a major impact on the world.
They incite the particles over the sky. They have a chemtrail over New York City for a month or so. And they excite the particles, right? And they're able to get it to light up in the shape of a spaceship, right? And then in Brookhaven just, zaps a little zap right under to a building right under where the spaceship is, and everybody's going to think it's the spaceship and zapping shit, right? Am I too far off on something like that? I mean, Project Bluebeam. Really, it doesn't seem like it's that complicated when you read the technology. And not only that, is if you read it, this is 100-year-old technology. So their ability to do it now, yeah. And with the dumbed down generation that we live in, yeah, people will believe it. They will, because they're fucking idiots. Jerry, they can do anything with frequency. Yeah, if they can control weather, they can make anything. They can make sacred... Yeah, sure can. You can bet your ass. You bet your ass they can make it. They can make sacred geometry. They can make anything. In theory, you're able to, especially with the aluminum being inside some of these chemtrails, it's not just that they can excite these particles to make shapes. Remember, shape is also sound. Okay, it's frequency. They can make noise from the sky. Okay, that would really scare the shit. Think about it. Think about, if you were walking down a city street, and let's say at dusk or at night, at nighttime, you look up, you see what looks like a spaceship that's making noise, whatever kind of noise they want to make, and then all of a sudden a building gets zapped. What are you gonna think? I mean, you're gonna think aliens. Let me get the fuck out of here, right? In the sky, they still believe 9/11. Yeah, I mean, that's sad. I mean, we're already on the lasers and shit like that with 9/11. I'm fucking they're on there. They're thinking hijackers. I'll tell you something. That's a scary thing, that people are so asleep that they think hijackers freaking flew into this. No. It's scary to think that there's people out there that think like that. I know. Sad. It is sad. I think what's scarier is if you ever go to a doctor and they're not awake. You're like, holy shit, you ain't operating on me, man. Get the fuck out of here. That's what I would be saying. Of course, I don't go to doctors because fuck them. Unless Jerry's dying, he ain't going to no fucking doctor. I'll tell you that much right now. Fuck that. Blue dot, they give us false sense. Fighting sense. Hand matcha instead of them. Yeah. That is... I'm going to pull out the popcorn. With them, Rebecca. I mean, at this point, what can you do? You could be sitting there and trying to explain that to people in the street. If you're in the street, when someone, say you're in New York City and this is happening, right? You could be sitting there and trying to explain to them how the Tesla technology and is lighting up the particles and is creating a spaceship and creating the sign. They're going to look at you like you're crazy when they're actually thinking it's aliens. And and then that they're crazy. You're better off just getting the popcorn, sitting back, and watch the crazy people run. That's because that's all you can do. You can scream till you're blue in the face, but the people are just so far asleep. It is not going to do any good trying to explain what I just explained. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of people that are supposedly in the truth community that don't even understand this basic shit. And what do you want me to do? And could I be wrong? Sure, I could be wildly wrong on this whole situation. But what I'm saying there is when you have Tesla's paper or his communications with people like J.P. Morgan and shit like that, basically saying this, no, I'm not wild conspiracy theorist because that shit's over 100 years old talking about this science. I'm actually slow. I'm 100 years slow. That's what people don't understand, is they can call us conspiracy theorists or whatever you want, but when you talk about stuff like this, when this is based off of 100-year-old experimentation, we're actually behind. We're not far out into the future conspiracy theorists. We're behind
100 years behind. So that's another problem too. There, and then we're 100, catching up to their thinking. Yeah, I think we could surpass them if we take some shortcuts. But tell you something, we need to speed up real fast because we're discussing shit from 100 years ago, and people think this is wild technology. No, this is old-fashioned technology. Redirecting efforts to lead us scum. We're wrong. Yeah, it's okay that we're wrong, but we have to. So we have to open our minds to new things. We can't get locked on to what I try to stay away from is what's popular, even in the alternative community. If it's popular, I don't trust it. It's just like any other times. The CIA has studied groups forever and groupthink. They're on top of the game of what's popular. So if something is popular in the alternative community, I'm usually like, yeah, I'm going to step back and use my own brain, because that's the best way to really do anything. It's the ability to not have the outside influence control how you think. Because once we start to go along with what's popular, what do you think is going to be what they put into the space brain, or whatever the atmosphere brain that Tesla is talking about? The popular ideas, what the government wants. So if we train our brains to continuously use its own thinking ways, it's going to be less likely to be influenced by some kind of, what do you call it, earth brain is what Tesla was calling it. We don't need to be no earth brain, and that's the part where the Tesla technology is, you have to question. You got to say, hey, is what he was saying a good idea? Because to me, an earth brain, I'm not so sure is the best idea. It's this thing we struggle with when we wake up, is we see how many people are mindless robots, and we want to wake them all up. But then you see some people that actually wake up to certain ideas, and you see they're, I don't know, still they're maintain some part of ignorance and racism or hatred or whatever, and you're like, well, maybe they should not have woken up, or maybe there should be some kind of control through religion or something like that. I don't know. I still ponder these questions every day myself on what the extent of control should be, because in theory, no control is the way it should be. But, there's some people out there, I'm not sure if they should be out there without control. Full of lies. Yeah, that's what school is, one big indoctrination camp. But anyways, I'm going to cut it. Thanks for coming along. I hope some of the explanation of what these beams are coming from, okay, is fully explained. I would love to get onto the property at Brookhaven, or even somewhere like Louisiana or something, but there's no possible way. They have those things guarded very well, and wish there was a way that we can get more answers from these people. But the scientists live in their own different world, and they're never going to talk about this type of stuff. And if we do ever get these phony ass whistleblowers, they send us down the wrong paths. So I think looking into the past and the parallels to what happened this past week with that blue beam and Wardenclyffe are just, to me, it's just like they're too many. You can't call them coincidence. Too many parallels to pass up and not look at. That's the first half getting late here too. Well, I wish everybody a happy New Year. All right. And what is that? The New Year, anyways. That's like a rebirth, a Masonic rebirth. Is that where we got it? You know, it's actually year 6019 in the Masonic calendar. To all you scumbag Masons out there, happy 6019. To everybody else, have a merry, happy, delightful 2019. Toodles.